Hey everybody, this is Lewis doing my screencast about my lesson plan entitled Atoms and Molecules. The, the sort of meat behind this lesson is about the chemistry of life and how there are really 6 molecules that are responsible for allowing life to thrive on Earth. Through this lesson, students will look at really 3 main mass curriculum framework standards, MCF Biology 1.1, 1.2, and 2.1, where the learning goal is that they'll recognize that biological organisms are composed primarily of very few elements. The 6 most common are CH, NO, P, and S. The second one is that they will learn they'll be able to describe the basic molecular structures and primary functions of the 4 major categories of organic molecules, those being carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And then the third is to recognize the discoveries from Dalton, the atomic theory, Thomson's electron theory, the Rutherford nucleus experiment, and then the Bohr planetary model of the atom, and also how understand how each discovery leads to the modern theory. The third standard is going to be part of my lecture. The first 2 are really part of the hands-on lab that I'll be creating in this lesson. The lesson is interactive. It's very interactive, and it's also it's interactive because we have cooperative learning activities. There is a discussion and also a vocabulary activity. There is some of the homework we're going to be going over some of the homework. And as I do the lesson, I'm try to be very explicit with my expectations and also repeat those expectations and repeat the instructions throughout for each instruction. A basic overview is that the students will come in, I'll ask them to take a seat, I'll write out an outline for today's class on the board, I'll ask them to take out their lab, which they should have done for homework, and any questions related to their findings. And the homework was a chemistry of life packet, or would be. I'll ask students questions related to the packet content, just to go over it and try to reinforce the information that they learned. And then the next thing is we're going to do a think, pair, share discussion, which will engage them in the question of what are the most important elements what the most important elements are of living organisms. And the idea behind the think, pair, share discussion is that I'll give students the opportunity to either be a recorder, a speaker, or really probably is the 2. But if people are shy about answering questions in front of the class, it gives them the opportunity to sort of bow out but still be engaged in meaningful and thoughtful discussion about that's related to their homework, it's related to their lab. And I really love cooperative learning activities. They've changed my my ability to engage students in classroom discussions, and it helps to enable them to sort of synthesize information because they are just more responsible for it. We'll work on a vocab sheet next, and then we're going to watch a video, Bozeman Biology, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels, on CH-NOPS, which is carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. He makes really terrific screencasts. As they're watching, I'm going to ask students to consider which elements are the most important living organisms. So once again, repeating ideas and having students take very, very brief notes on it, in which I'll probably stop at some point during the video just to point out specific things that I want them to pay attention to. Next, I'll give a relatively brief lecture about the chemistry of life. Only slides 11 through 26 from my lecture. The students who have IEPs and 504s and also ELLs will have notes prepared for them. I have sort of different types of modified notes for each lecture that I give out. So the ELLs will actually have the ability, and 504s and IEP students, if it's written into their plan, the ELL specifically, they'll have the notes in advance so they can pre-read them. And I will give out highlighters to all students who would like them. I'll give full notes to pretty much anyone if they really feel like they need them. My hope is that students will actually take their own notes, but I think that it's nice to have some of these notes where they have to fill in the blanks, so that can be helpful. After we do the lectures, I'll give them probably like a 5-minute break and also sort of a kinesthetic wake-up activity where I'll finish lecturing, which probably would only be maybe a half an hour, 20 minutes of the lecture. And then I'll have them stand up and shake their heads and arms and kind of get the blood flowing and wake them back up. After we're done with that, my wife keeps calling me. After we're done with that, we're going to do the molecular molecules activity where they'll be building the ball and stick molecules. This activity will be sort of leveled, so the honors students will have to build a more complicated molecule of their choice. However, anyone that elects to build a more complicated molecule will get extra credit if they are not at the honors level, if they're in the core, because we have a mixed class. We have honors and core in the same class. There's a lot of differentiation that happens. It's kind of crazy. The other thing is that the students will have an option to use Google SketchUp to build their molecules, so they'll either be able to do a very hands-on activity where they're literally putting the balls and the sticks together, or if they are more tech savvy and interested in doing it, I'll allow them to do to build the molecules digitally, which is kind of fun, and it makes for an interesting tech activity. I'm going to give them warnings, a 5-minute warning toward the end, and also I'll walk around the room during this activity to remind students what their goals are, to answer questions, and to try to spend some one-on-one time with students. I think that's very helpful, opposed to sitting behind a desk for the whole time. I really try to interact with my kids while we're doing labs. At the end, they'll hand in either the 3D, well, they'll hand in a 3D molecule worksheet, or they'll print out their 3D molecules from their computers. And then after that, we'll do a quick chemistry of life vocab quiz, and after that, I have 2-hour periods, so it's a long day. After that, they'll start researching on a properties of water PowerPoint group presentation where students will be in 3 to 4 student groups. And my suggestion is that they'll split their presentation into 3 or 4 sections. Each of them take a section and then work together. Once again, I'll restate the objectives and expectations. I'll go over the rubric for the project, and make sure that as they're working on doing research for it, that everyone understands by walking around the room and checking in with them. At the very end of the class, there'll be a dismissal and a do now, where I'll ask students to draw a picture of a water molecule. Ideally, by the end of this class, they'll have built, we'll have discussed, we'll have had actual hands-on water molecules, and they'll be able to see that, because I'll walk around, and in walking around I'll talk about the polarity of water and why it's important, and how water is able to pull things apart because it's polar. And as I'm walking around, I'll really make sure that they all get that, so that when they do their do now, I know that they've exhibited to me before we do the that final assessment. I think that this lesson plan is going to be a lot of fun. I think it will work for all students because there are hands-on components, there are research components, there are group components, where there are ways to engage in learning through just watching a video. I think that it's a really well-rounded lesson, and generally these types of lessons work pretty well for me. So that is my lesson in a nutshell.